Okay, so picture this, right? You're out in the middle of rolling green hills, beautiful sky, fluffy clouds, and you've got a staff in your hand. You're leading a flock of sheep. Sounds idyllic, right? Like something out of a painting, you know? Well, that's the image of shepherding we're all familiar with. But today, we're doing something a little different. We're putting on our virtual hiking boots, and we are taking a deep dive into what it really takes to be a shepherd in the 21st century.
And it's a lot more high-tech than you might think.
Right. Like we were looking at stuff from RoleCatcher. You know, they're all about helping people figure out their careers and their guide on shepherding. Like it really caught our eye.
What really surprised me was how much information they provide. Like, it's not just about, sheep in the meadow. Like, we're talking career stages, salaries, even interview tips specifically for shepherds.
Yeah, how do you negotiate a salary when your coworkers are a bunch of sheep?
Yeah, seriously. But, their guide really highlights this unique blend of traditional skills and, like, cutting-edge technology that modern shepherds use.
Okay, so let's get into it. We know that shepherding is about caring for animals, but I'm already getting the sense that it's about a lot more than that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's about really understanding the land and how to manage grazing patterns to make sure that the soil stays healthy. You even work with like a whole network of other professionals, like vets and landowners. It's a lot.
So way more complex than a lot of people probably think. And this is where it gets really interesting, right? The technology side of it, I mean, RoleCatcher even mentioned GPS tracking.
Yeah.
For the sheep.
It's true. And not just to like find your way to Starbucks, which I mean, could be helpful, but shepherds are using this to track their flocks, monitor their locations, especially if you're talking about vast distances, challenging terrain, all of that. It's about being proactive.
Okay, so that's really interesting. So technology is really changing the game here. No more just relying on intuition and a trusty sheepdog, huh?
Well, I mean, those are still important, but it gives shepherds this whole other level of insight and control that they wouldn't have had before. It's about working smarter, not harder, I think.
Yeah. So for anyone listening who is maybe thinking, hey, shepherding, this sounds like my dream job, we do have to address, kind of the sheep in the room here. RoleCatcher does not shy away from the challenges. And honestly, some of them sound pretty intense.
Yeah, you have to be realistic about it. We've talked about the idyllic side, but shepherding, it can be really physically demanding, long, unpredictable hours.
And let's be real, the pay probably isn't great.
Exactly. So there's this learner's dilemma, right? Like, it has this romantic appeal, it really does, but those practical realities, you have to kind of weigh those two, right?
So how do you weigh those two? Because that's kind of the age-old dilemma, passion versus practicality. How does that apply specifically to shepherding? What advice would you give?
I think it comes down to, like, your non-negotiables. What really matters to you in a career. If it's, if you want to be making a ton of money, maybe shepherding isn't for you, right? But if you really prioritize independence and having that connection to nature and working with animals, then those challenges might feel worth it to you.
So it's all about finding that balance between what you are passionate about and then also what you're willing to put up with.
Yeah.
Every job has its downsides, right?
Exactly. And shepherding is no exception. But the thing is, RoleCatcher, they don't just leave you hanging with a list of pros and cons. They actually outline this whole career progression.
A career progression. So there's like a ladder to climb in the sheep world.
Think of it more like a winding path, like with different forks, different scenic routes. You can really make it your own. And RoleCatcher, they break it down into these distinct stages. It starts with like entry-level positions and goes all the way up to, get this, head shepherd.
Shepherds. Now that sounds official. Like you should get a staff or something.
Right. And with each stage, like, the responsibilities change, obviously, the skills you need.
So I'm guessing like entry level isn't all about negotiating grazing rights with cattle ranchers. What's that actually look like?
No, not quite. At the entry level, it's really about like, learning the ropes. It's very hands-on. Think repairing fences, maybe helping out with shearing, even things like bottle feeding lambs, if you're working on a farm, that kind of thing. It's really about those foundational skills.
Okay, so you're getting hands dirty, learning everything.
Yeah.
But what about like when you reach mid-level?
Mid-level is where you start to get a little more specialized, take on a little more responsibility. RoleCatcher had this example. It really stuck with me. A mid-level shepherd might be in charge of planning grazing rotations.
Grazing rotations. Okay, help me out here. What is that?
It's all about sustainability, so you're moving the flock to different pastures, but it's all very timed out, right? Because you don't want to overgraze, you want to promote healthy regrowth of the plants, and even manage like parasites, things like that. So it's this whole balancing act. You have to really know what you're doing, know the land, be observant.
Wow. So much more strategy than people realize. Okay, so no pressure then. Mid-level shepherds. So say you're like a real go-getter. You've been working your way up. You're at the top of your game. You are the head shepherd. What are you doing on a daily basis?
Well, you're probably dealing with a much larger flock, I would think. Maybe even like multiple flocks across different locations.
See, now that's where that GPS comes in handy.
Right. But it's more than just monitoring. You're making the decisions about breeding, about health management. You're probably even negotiating land use with farmers, with ranchers, all of that.
It's like you're the CEO of like a woolly empire. Except your board meetings probably have a lot more bleeding. But here's the thing, right? Someone's listening to this. Maybe they're intrigued by all of this, the challenges, the tech, the sheep. But they're thinking, like, is this really a viable career path? Like, is there room to do more, to grow beyond just being a shepherd?
See, and that's what's so interesting. RoleCatcher, they really emphasize this is not a dead-end job. You can specialize even further. Maybe you become like this master breeder. You're known for your sheep.
You're like the sheep whisperer.
Exactly. Or maybe, you really, you've honed your skills in land management, and so you consult, you work with these large ranches, And of course, there's always the entrepreneurial route, right? You could start your own sheep farm, your own related business. There are so many options.
So many different paths. It's really not just about, tending the sheep. It's about like this whole skill set that you're building. And speaking of skill sets, can we talk a little bit more about RoleCatcher? Because their platform, they have some pretty cool tools on there. It could help with any career path.
Right.
They really took all of the challenges of like, building a career and said, okay, we got this. Like that whole AI resume thing, that just blew me away.
It's amazing.
Because it's one thing to have a template, right? But they actually look at the job description. They help you figure out what skills to highlight.
Yeah.
It's like you have this like secret weapon to get past the applicant tracking systems.
Right. And it goes back to that working smarter, not harder, like we were talking about with the shepherds and the GPS.
Exactly.
And then the interview practice, too.
Oh, yeah. That's such a good one.
I know, right?
You record yourself answering questions. AI gives you feedback.
It's like having a coach in your pocket.
Totally.
Helping you refine those answers, sound more confident. I love that.
So really, even if someone's not, ditching their laptop to become a shepherd, they can still get a lot out of RoleCatcher's tools.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's really the point. They're making these essential career building skills accessible to everyone. It doesn't matter if you're just starting out, if you're, a seasoned professional looking for a change, even if you want to start your own business.
Totally. Okay, so as we kind of wrap up this deep dive into the world of shepherding, I keep coming back to this one thought. Shepherding, it's often seen as like a very solitary profession. You're out there, it can be lonely. But now you have all this technology, all this connectivity. So is it making shepherding more isolated or less?
Ooh, that's a really good question.
What do you think?
Because it's almost like a double-edged crook, right?
Totally.
Like, on the one hand, yeah, you've got the GPS tracking, the remote monitoring, which could, in theory, make people even more isolated out there.
Right, you don't need anyone.
Right. But at the same time, it's connecting them to this huge network of support that maybe they wouldn't have access to otherwise. I mean, think about it. You can consult with a vet instantly, no matter where you are. You can get weather updates. You can connect with other shepherds. Like, there's this whole social element that could be possible.
It's like building this virtual community around a profession that is so physically isolated.
Exactly. And I think that's something for all of us to think about, honestly, not just shepherds, As we use more and more technology in our lives and in our work, are we using it to connect with other people, or are we letting it isolate us?
That's such a good point. Definitely something to think about.
Yeah.
Well, I think we have unearthed just a treasure trove of information today.
We really have a lot to think about.
The challenges, the technology, the sheep, of course. But it all comes back to this idea of, always learning, always growing, being open to new possibilities.
Right. And you never know where it might lead.
Exactly. You never know. You might trade your laptop in for a staff and a flock of sheep.
You never know.
Or maybe you just update your resume, try something new.
Yep.
Who knows? Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive. Until next time.
Thanks for having me.